I've had far too many thoughts about inFAMOUS over the years, as you might have guessed from the hour-and-a-half video I did on the first game alone, and no matter how much you love a piece of media, it's much healthier for both you and it to be critical of its weak points. Not all the time, obviously, you're allowed to just enjoy something and move on, but I have always found my home in fanfiction spaces, which does include things like what-if, lore, and theory videos. That's just fanfiction dressed up as pseudo-intellectual nerdery. Own your cringe as God intended. Point is, it's been a while since I did a standalone storyboard video, so why not have one where it's just me brain vomiting about my favorite game of all time? We have two parts to this video. The first is alterations to the karma decisions of the first game, otherwise known as canon divergence, and the second is a speculative game set after the ending of inFAMOUS 2, otherwise known as an AU or alternate universe, because the canon ending is good karma. If you need a summary of the first game, you can watch my video since all you need to know about the second game is the evil ending. If you already know the lore, let's get into it, shall we? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below for the algorithm gods. Also, if I sound off, it's because I've been sick with a sore throat and lots of coughing, so there's that. So, as much as I can enjoy the karma system, there's two major issues with it. The first is inflexibility, and the second is a lack of nuance. In a perfect world, with all the time and resources I could ask for, I think I would go with something similar to the dual meters in Fable 2. It has a good and evil scale, but it also has a purity and corruption scale. You can be good with high corruption or evil with high purity. In the case of inFAMOUS, you would be able to freely choose how your powers develop, and that affects your karma. If your focus is on protection and pacification, or aggression and mercilessness. The more you take powers in the other, the more your appearance changes to match. However, this would be in tandem with a scale that measures what choices you've actually made for the city. Are you using your lethal abilities to take out threats and act as a scary guard dog for the public? Are you using your pacification-focused abilities to enforce punitive curfews and punish civilians for not obeying the police? That kind of thing. If you and your powers are scary, people will be afraid of you, but if you keep helping them and making things better, then their attitudes will change for the better as the story progresses, even if they never quite get used to looking you in the eye. If you look like a shiny, brave hero, however, people are more likely to trust you and make it easier for you to manipulate, take advantage, or outright screw them over. Civilians will slowly become divided and unsure. You're working with the cops and fighting the gangs. That must mean that you're one of the good guys, right? Do you see what I'm getting at here? Of course, in this scenario, you could just play it straight and be a bad guy with scary evil powers or a good guy with heroic non-lethal abilities. That isn't the point here. If we want to double down on adding flexibility, you could have a separate city choices tracker for each district. Maybe the people in the Neon love you, but maybe you're hated in the Warren. As for the actual karma moments in the game, let's go over each of them and see if we can make it messier. Since the color coding and perception of your powers is linked to the abilities you take, these choices aren't presented as objective good and evil, but in neutral grays without labeling. Could you still argue that one choice is morally better than the other? Absolutely, but I'd want you to come to that conclusion yourself. The food drop. Instead of just the Reapers turning up, the remaining cops get involved and approach Cole after the fight, telling him that they'll take it from here. Your first option would be to let the cops distribute the food. They'll take a large share of it for themselves, but the more desperate civilians, especially those with children, will get fed. The rest have to fend for themselves. Your second option is to intimidate the cops, leading to a fight breaking out. Those still alive retreat, and many civilians are scared away, with some caught in the crossfire to lethal results. There are fatalities, and the cops still working are weakened, but more people overall get food. The riot. Now, oftentimes, police need very little provocation, if any, to start brutalizing people, so instead of the protesters passively yelling, they try to push on their own, so the riot is already happening. What changes is how you interact with it. Option 1. Fight with the crowd to try and keep them safe and support their efforts across the bridge. Or Option 2. Let the protesters go first so they take the brunt of the violence. After all, Cole just spent a day or more running for his life from angry mobs of civilians, so he might not feel super inclined to put himself in danger for them. Open the door. The power's off, we need to get it back on, but Brandon is blocking the way because he thinks he's protecting his wife, whom the Reapers have already killed. Option 1. Tell Brandon his wife is dead. Instead of opening the door, this sends him into a grief spiral where he refuses to let Cole in because he blames Cole for causing this mess in the first place. Moya would then order Cole to deal with Brandon because getting the power back on is more important than one man's life. Option 2. Lie to Brandon, telling him that Moya got his wife out of the city. He's relieved and opens the door, thanking Cole for letting him know before leaving. The power is back on, but Brandon eventually figures it out and hurts Cole's reputation with the neon. The tar kegs. Ah yes, the hallucination juice. This is mostly me making it less stupid on both choices. Option 1. Use Cole's powers like a plasma torch to melt the jousts, keeping the kegs mounted to the water towers. This is safer for Cole and doesn't risk the structure of the tower, but it's time consuming and allows more tar to directly enter the water system. Option 2. Use Cole's powers to blast the entire keg off the tower, immediately removing it and stopping the flow of tar into the water system. You don't do this from the top of the tower, but this is less safe for Cole because it aerosolizes the tar, which falls like a rain cloud and contaminates the rooftop. It also runs the risk of damaging the water tower itself. Exposure. So while you're looking for who murdered Dale, you run into a dude making posters of Cole, and he asks you to choose which one you like. In-game, these are very clearly distinguished along karma lines, but here they would be Option 1, a poster that shows Cole shielding people from the military and government forces that trapped them in this awful situation, or Option 2, a poster that shows Cole brutalizing the Reapers and other forces within the city trying to make life worse for everyone. Them or me. Instead of injured people suddenly being under a golem that just happened to show up, the golem is still there, but so are the police trying to chase it down. Option 1, help the police kill it. Option 2, let the cops take the brunt of its attacks and take it out once it's weak. Intentions. This would play out exactly the same because I already think it works perfectly as is. The sphere. Option 1, the sphere is destroyed, John gets sucked into the vortex, etc, etc. Option 2, use the sphere again with the context that Cole is consciously disregarding his well-being, his public perception, and any chance of having a normal life after this point because there's no going back. Kessler has to be dealt with, and whatever nightmare Kessler showed him coming from the future also has to be dealt with. He needs all the power he can get, no matter what that turns him into. The additional note here would be changing his speech to Kessler if he uses it, going from "Grr, arg, this is my turf" to "I don't care what I have to do or become if it means keeping the rest of the world safe from monsters like you." Not huge differences, obviously, since I didn't want to alter the premise of them too much, but hopefully enough to make them less cut and dry. But what would a brand new story be like, set in a world after Cole became the Beast? The second game's evil ending led to Cole becoming the Beast, not for world domination or because he just felt like killing everyone, but because conduits are the only ones who can survive the spreading plague of ray field radiation created by the ray sphere blast at the beginning of all this. And how are conduits made? By draining the neuroelectricity of those around them and channeling it into someone who has the conduit gene. The Beast has the power to create ray sphere blasts, sacrificing humanity to activate those with the conduit gene so that there is at least someone who survives the plague. The heroic ending meant using the ray field inhibitor to let off a blast that would nullify that radiation, and also kill everyone on Earth with the conduit gene, even if it wasn't activated yet. And the context for making that choice is not being 100% sure that it will wipe out the plague, whereas the Beast's method is shown to work right in front of us. Now, even though the reasoning is unfathomable to me, the devs decided to go with the heroic ending when they did Second Son, because that's the ending most people saw by way of trophy achievement numbers, which was not only a very silly way to determine the direction of the setting, it also meant that they had to retcon that ending so that it didn't wipe out all of the conduits, just most of them. Whatever. What would I do in an infamous game set after Cole becomes the Beast and changes the world forever? Well, I'm picturing something like a cross between Fallout and Horizon Zero Dawn, insofar that it's been a few centuries at the very least, and nature has taken over most of the old world, but a new civilization of Conduits has rebuilt in its place, creating a distinct juxtaposition between overgrown ruins and modern, even futuristic cityscapes, with a backdrop of weird radiation doing weird things. Now, because Sweet Baby Inc. itself is obviously holding a shotgun to the back of my head, we'd play as a young woman. That is a joke, I'm a lesbian, of course I'm gonna make stories about women. But yes, we'd play as a young woman called Lana Pierce, a conduit with plant-based powers. A lot of her attacks would utilize vines and roots, seed pods, thorns, needles, spores, sap, etc. You may be wondering, Morgan, how the hell would you use sap as part of your superpowers? Say hello to Heracleum mantagazianum, otherwise known as giant hogweed, also called giant cow parsley, cartwheel flower, or wild parsnip. This is why botanists and other plant nerds prefer to use the scientific name, because different places have different common names for the same plant and it gets confusing fast. The sap from the giant hogweed is phototoxic, which has this cute feature where it causes phytophotodermatitis when it comes into contact with human skin. In plain English, it makes you hypersensitive to UV, which means that, once again, the sun is a deadly laser, and will make you break out into painful rashes and swollen blisters. Now imagine you can make that shit seep from your palms and throw it in someone's face. Not to mention all the toxins you could potentially access, like the Gimpy tree, Dendrocnide moroides, is basically a stinging nettle on steroids, capable of inflicting burning agony on someone that can last for days. Cerbera odolam, otherwise known as the side tree, whose seeds can stop the heart within hours. Calviceps purpurea, ergot, which among other things can send someone into manic hallucinatory seizures and spasms. And if you really want to get nasty, there's cordyceps, forcibly taking control of someone's body and puppeteering them to do your bidding. Lana is figuring out her place in the world, allowing the player to also feel like they're discovering things alongside her. While everyone has powers now, the ubiquity of it means that it isn't something that stands out, and not everyone wants to be what we'd think of as a superhero. After all, some powers would make you great at construction or quarrying. If you're empathetic, maybe you're a great therapist. If you can fly, maybe you do search and rescue, or you're a civil engineer, because flying means you can easily check bridges and dams for issues. So there would be some influence on what line of work you go into based on the powers you present with, but it's not set in stone. Because of all the Rayfield radiation released by Coal Awakening all the conduits, people now present their powers at the onset of puberty. It's just something that happens with development now. You may be wondering, are people without the conduit gene ever born? Even if both parents have it, there's a possibility it might not be passed on. It would be easier to figure out the likelihood of this happening if we knew more about the gene itself, but the infamous fandom wiki says 1 in 16 people have the conduit gene. I'd love a citation on that, alas, it's what we have to work with. To put this in context, that works out to 6.25%, compared to the roughly 2% of people on Earth with green eyes, which is about 160 million. This would mean that out of the 8 billion people on Earth currently, 500 million would be conduits. About 8 million people live in New York City, 530,000 in Edinburgh, nearly 6 million live in Ankara, 1 million in Belgrade, 9 million in Mexico City, 4 million in Nairobi. My point is that 500 million people is a lot of people to go around. It would very much be noticeable that we're missing the other 7.5 billion, but we have bounced back from much smaller numbers. For the USA, this would mean a population of 21 million people, likely congregating in coastal cities or places where the major highways converge, so Seattle, San Francisco, Salt Lake City, Chicago, Nashville, Dallas, Boston, and so on. The populations of which barely make up half that number at around 8 million, so we're working with a lot, and this population has superpowers to support everyday life. The point of this was if people are born without it, so let's just make it easy for ourselves and say it's a dominant gene. Moving on. Cole isn't present in the story. Contact with him was lost when he left the US to transform the rest of the world. We know he succeeded because humans are talked about like an extinct species, and we've had contact from conduits on those other continents. It's just that no one knows what happened to coal, and because it's been a few hundred years, a religion sprouted up, viewing coal as an uplifting force who paved the way for conduits. The moments we see during the end of Infamous 2 are referred to as the Rebirth War, where conduits were birthed from a dying humanity. We'd see that where Lana comes from, things are good. It's socialist in that non-threatening way people like when you don't call it socialism but it is, i.e. the government has a responsibility to take care of its people, community centres, guaranteed housing, education, healthcare, etc. Not a utopia, because that implies perfection, but pretty good. The story would start in Seattle, only just recognisable through the changes wrought by the rebirth. We'd see that Lana works in agriculture, helping with farming efficiency and soil health. It's an easy job for her and her powers, and introduces us to how they work, like her radar pulse having more to do with root systems than electricity, through which she can sense impurities and botanical issues, but also people if they're standing on grass or hiding in branches. She can also mark targets with harmless spores, which allows her to track their movements, and she does this with the local barn cats to keep an eye on them. She spends her downtime taking part in a new combat sport conduits engage in, dueling in an arena with their powers because they heal fast and are much more durable than regular humans. So basically like the competitive elemental bending in Legend of Korra. This gives the player a more combat-focused sense of her abilities, where she shrugs off her jacket and we see that the vines snaking down her arms seem to be integrated with her body, like an extension of it, especially around her spine. She would also have a movement and locomotion similar to Spider-Man with his web-slinging. Talking to her parents over dinner, Lana would tell them that she's thinking about taking time off and traveling to the East Coast, curious as many conduits are about the cradle of Empire City, what remains of the first game's location now viewed as something of a holy site, the origin point of conduits. They aren't opposed, but they want her to be careful because much of the US East Coast has become extremely volatile thanks to the rebirth. West of the Rocky Mountains, it's pretty safe, but the further east you go, the more fortified settlements have to be to protect from animals changed by Rayfield radiation, failed experiments released by humans during the war, chemical fields, regular radiation left behind by nukes, and obviously certain groups of conduits who don't want to cooperate. The point is, the world is still scarred even a few centuries later. As an aside, we'd be able to see that her dad has ice powers and her mother has shadow powers, something they both use for mundane things like adding ice to drinks and blocking an annoying amount of sunlight from the window before the curtains are drawn. Lana's plans are derailed when she attends a party with her friends on the city outskirts, which is attacked by monsters, big hulking things built like something reptilian, grafted onto a gorilla, and yet far too human looking at the same time. They also appear to have cybernetic parts to them, particularly on the spine and skull. While the partygoers can fight back, these things are tough and fast, badly injuring many and killing a few. By the time most of the monsters are dead, the largest one has grabbed some of those present, including Lana's friends, and put them in a cage on its back. She can't stop it from running away, but she follows, of course, and eventually sees the creature boarding a large VTOL. She has just enough time to hit it with a spore cluster before it takes off, flying southeast. She's too exhausted to follow right away, but at least she can track it. In the aftermath, Lana is glad to be alive but worried about her friends. Authorities are unsure what the creatures are or where they've come from because they don't match any known entity or technology they've seen before. The VTOL isn't a unique sight since not all conduits can fly and they use high-speed rail to connect the populated cities. They haven't done away with mechanical transportation, but it is unusual. Communication with the other cities reveals that attacks like this have happened elsewhere. Some people are killed, others are taken captive and never seen again, and Houston reports that one of their flyers attempted to bring down the VTOL, only to be hit with some kind of energy blast that fried his nervous system, killing him instantly. Given how tough conduits are, that shouldn't have happened. Because Lana tagged the thing, she's the only one who can track it, so while the authorities would much rather keep her out of danger when they have conduits whose job it is to fight with intent to kill, she's necessary to finding out who attacked them. So after saying goodbye to her parents, who are not thrilled about this development, Lana is sent out with a squad of designated Defender conduits, 3 of them, each with their own names, powers, and personalities. Captain Aaron Kennedy, the leader and tracker, who has a suite of beastly abilities including heightened senses, super strength, claws and teeth as tough as titanium, and telepathy with canines. Tough, serious, very butch, but compassionate. Robin Whitaker, the tech specialist with a photographic memory, psychometry which allows her to gain information about objects, events, and people by touch, and invisibility, quiet, nerdy, obsessed with moths. Sean Clark, the Saboteur. He can control his own bones, generate new growth, manipulate its shape and density to turn himself into a human blender or a battering ram. Tallest of the bunch, unsettling in gangly proportions, but a sweet dude tempered by pragmatism. They set off on motorbikes, which appear to be powered by an energy cell rather than a liquid fuel, so the noise they make is less the growl of an engine and more a low, warbling hum. We'd see them traveling through multiple areas, moving southeast through Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Utah, pausing at rest stops to sleep or talk to people, before they eventually come to stop at Salt Lake City because the trail seems to be leading them to Colorado. See, we learn through expedition from Robin that there are a few areas around the USA that are more contaminated than others. At some point during the rebirth, warheads were launched, decimating most of Colorado and the land surrounding it. There's a similar scorched earth area around the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland, and pockets of the same devastation are scattered all along the east coast, but Colorado is the worst example of this. Captain Kennedy asks Lana how confident she is that the trail leads towards Denver, and Lana answers that she knows that's where it's leading them. The few times people have investigated Colorado, and Denver specifically, they either came back severely hurt or they didn't come back at all, and the ones who came back ranted about terrible monsters. Believing Lana, the squad presses forward, navigating the scarred landscape and overgrown wilderness, avoiding patrols of the same monsters that attacked the party, until they weave their way through the mountains and see the city of Denver sprawling out below them, not in ruin, but rebuilt, functioning. This is where the rest of the game would take place, as we find that Denver isn't inhabited by conduits, but humans that are immune to Rayfield radiation. They would be similar to the Enclave in Fallout in that this group, and those like them, are continuations of the old US government that resulted from Operation Firebreak, referring to themselves as the Republic of Humanity. Firebreak was meant to isolate pockets of humanity underground by decimating the surface and releasing mutagenic compounds into the surrounding ecosystems, ensuring no one would want to investigate the area because of its toxicity and volatile wildlife. In time, those underground would discover a way to protect themselves from these dangers and emerge to begin retaking America. Through capturing and experimenting on conduits, they advanced their technology, bolstering their military might with the kind of monsters that have been kidnapping people all over. The military organization of the Republic is essentially a more brutal version of the DUP in Second Son, called the Vanguards. Instead of being run by a conduit, it's run by a cybernetically enhanced woman by the name of Rachel Logan, who talks about conduits like they're subhuman beasts who want to eat your children, so not a far cry from Bertrand in the second game. A lot of the game would be spent infiltrating the area, weakening the Vanguard's operations and finding sympathizers within the populace, because it turns out people will start to ask questions when they see tortured people begging and crying for help like any regular human would. Not all, but there's always going to be people who, when faced with the horrible reality of what their government is doing, will go, "Oh, absolutely not." Not to mention, the Republic is an autocratic police state. It ensures everyone is housed, fed, and healthy, but everyone is required to keep the population going by donating genetic material for incubator labs. Children are raised in batches by the state and assigned roles when they turn 18. No, you don't get a choice, it's decided for you based on what the state needs from you. Contraceptive is mandatory to avoid accidental births, ensure children are properly educated in the truth of the world, read indoctrination, and to make sure that the only loyalty citizens feel is to the Republic without something like a family getting in the way. Citizens who are found to be sympathizing or even working with conduits are charged with treason and sent to work camps, often ending up experimented on by the science division. It makes sense that a society like this would develop after humanity was all but wiped out thanks to conduits, or one very specific conduit. Cole is referred to as just the demon when mentioned by the Republic. However, it's not a good place to live if you aren't willing to spend the rest of your life in perfect lockstep with everything the government does. Hence, sympathizers and rebels. Over the course of the game, Robin and Lana would do the most of the social interaction because both of them can visually pass as human, where Sean and Erin can't. As long as Lana doesn't take off her jacket, no one would know, but Sean has a lower jaw that splits open like a python when he talks, and Erin has wolf-like eyes, pointed ears, and prominent fangs. When engaging in combat, Lana hides her face with a wooden mask that starts off as a plain oval with eye holes and changes depending on how her powers progress, similar to the changes in the previous chapter. The abilities you use aren't hinged on the story choices you make, but it does flavor things differently. I.e., if Lana is focused more on restraining her enemies, crowd control through spores that put people to sleep, healing people, support and defense abilities like shields and walls of newly grown trees, then her mask will start to look friendlier, sprouting branch-like horns that flower and rounded ears like a bear, with a mane of ferns covering the back of her head that leave the smell of lavender behind. But if Lana is focused more on ferocity, on toxins and mind-controlling fungal spores, crushing thorns, composting her enemies to grow spiky bark armor, then her mask will start to split at mouth level, growing jagged around the edges, the surface rough to the touch, the horns meant to impale and tipped with a sticky black fluid. A mane of damp vines that smell like rotting wood covers the back of her head, and her eyes will start to glow softly with a bilious yellow light. The latter, as you would imagine, might make it harder for people to trust her. We'd spend some time securing allies in the rebels, releasing people from work camps, rescuing individuals from certain death, and intercepting prisoner convoys. We would eventually lose Robin at some point while looking for our missing people, finding her in one of the labs having been subjected to a vivisection, her invisibility a point of interest to the scientists here. How we handle that is up to the player, but it nonetheless upsets Lana greatly, and can be the trigger for a huge amount of retributive devastation. How messy this all gets is affected in large part by the player's actions in Denver, potentially leading to a very bloody war between humans and Conduits breaking out again, or a situation where the Republic is forced to capitulate and Seattle offers asylum to the humans who want it. And when you make choices that affect that story, I want them to be a mix of decision types, some clear-cut, some grey, and some where there's just no good answer, and through it all you'd be able to do some really messed up things, whether they're for justifiable reasons or not. Think infecting someone with fungal spores so you can control them like a meat puppet into murdering their otherwise well-protected family member or spouse who is part of the vanguards. Morally fucked up? Yes. But the other option is an open fight where many more will lose their lives and collateral damage is very likely. How many lives are you willing to put at risk just to protect your sense of ethics? Someone with Lana's powers could easily disrupt the Republic's food supply by inducing crop failure and encouraging mold to develop on existing food. She could cause chaos by contaminating water supplies with the kind of toxins you find in Datura. Or she could help by bolstering crops against disease, by giving people the kind of medicinal herbs and extracts that make medicine. Could I go into more detail? Yes, but I really only had the concept and a rough idea of the initial story in mind, so a fully detailed plot would take much longer to work out, and I was more interested in setting up the world itself. Regardless, I hope this was at least an interesting thought experiment about what could have been had we gone with the Cole becomes the Beast ending. It's been a wild year. We reached the 100k milestone and I'm so very appreciative of you all. Let's make sure that we recharge as best we can, take our medication, and make 2026 a better year. Alright?